This is the Advaita After Hours podcast, where we explore how spirituality influences our daily lives. Hari Om, I am Rajesh, and in today's conversation, Narayanan, Gopi, Shillika, and I reflect on a discourse by Swami Aparajitananda on the Sunderkand. We explore the lessons that we can learn from Hanumanji around Bhakti, devotion, and Jnanam, true knowledge. So sit back, listen, and reflect as you join us on this journey. Hari Om. Welcome, everybody. It's been a few weeks since we got together, but one thing that I think is going to be really exciting today is that we're going to reflect on an experience that all four of us shared together, all five of us, including Sandhya here, shared together, which was Swami Aparajitananda's recent visit. So maybe Narayanji, you can kick it off by just kind of summarizing overview of what we were treated to, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the issues that arose.
All right. Thank you. So, Swamiji talked about Sundarakand, which is the fifth kand in Ramayana, which consists of 7, depending on how you look at it. 7, if you consider the entire Ramayana. If you choose to have only the happy Ramayana and not the sad Ramayana, Uttarakand you can leave aside, and that leaves it 6. So, Balaganda is the first one where Dasharatha is having the babies, and all these kids are small, and all their training and all of that. Ayodhya Kand is the training, the preceding phase before they go to forest and all their life in Ayodhya. Aranyaganda is when they go to forest after Rama was asked by Dasharatha to go to forest at the behest of Kaikeyi. Kishkinda Kand is where it's mostly about the Vanra King Vali and his fights and his exploits and all of that, while Rama and Lakshmana were in Kishkinda. And then follows Sundarakand, where having met Hanuman and Sugriva, they decide to go in search of Sita to Lanka. They know that Sita is in Lanka. They go and search. So all the exploits of Hanuman and how Hanuman shows his character, his bhakti, his everlasting faith on the God, that is Sundarakand. And then, of course, Sundarakand is followed by Yuddhakand because of fight, and then Rama kills Ravana. End of Ramayana. Eventually, Ramayana is a nice story to be told, but if you look at it, it's our own inner journey where it's a fight between our inner right and our inner ego, and the victory eventually, which has to be of the inner soul against our ego being Ravana. So 10 heads, which all of our ego races in different ways at many times. So that's the overall story of Ramayana. Sundarakand is more of Hanuman, more about Hanuman, showing his devotion to Lord Rama. So it is like Swamiji said, it is the story of bhakti, of bhakta, and of Bhagwan. So that's how and different Ramayana versions have slight variants in how Sundarakand is portrayed. Tulsi Ramayana, which is what Swamiji did, is much more poetic and much more glorifying of Hanuman's devotion, whereas Adhyatma Ramayana is more matter of fact. It still talks about Hanuman's devotion and faith and all of that. So Hanuman goes to Lanka. He had to jump across the ocean. He finds obstacles along the way in the form of the Mainaga mountain, Surasa, the snake god, and then Simhiga, the shadow eating whatever. Right. So the idea is that you will have, as you go on a path of doing something right, you will have obstacles. He did not choose to rest on the lavish, nice Mainaga mountains. With Surasa, when Surasa's mouth got bigger and bigger and bigger, he decided to go small. So Swamiji's explanation was that it's sometimes it pays to go small, rather than having to go bigger than everything else. And Simhiga is that thing that will catch your own shadow. So be aware of your own shadow. Be aware of the pitfalls along the way. He goes there, finds Sita, and only after he found Sita and gave Sita the message, of course, it's nice and poetic as to how he does all of that. Then only he finds that he is hungry and he hasn't slept. Right, the idea that you fulfill all that you have to do along the path before you take any rest. Make sure that you, again, same idea of self effort that Bhagavad Gita also says all the time. Put your maximum effort towards what you have to before you decide to take a break, if you have to take a break. And then Ravana's arrogance when he catches Hanuman. Again, Hanuman is caught only by Brahmastra. Hanuman has a power not to even get surrendered to Brahmastra, but he decided that he should show Brahmaji respect, and therefore he decides to surrender to the Brahmastra. He is brought to Ravana's court, and Ravana is insulting him, asking him what he is, but all the way he's telling, when Ravana asks me, "Do you know me?" He's saying that, yeah, I know you. You are the one that Vali took on his tail, right? You're the one that Kartavira Arjuna defeated. So it's kind of giving Ravana a little poke. So when you try to ask somebody else, "Do you know who I am?" and try to think that only others know your good things, always be aware that you also have dark sides that others might know, and not ask who you are if you don't have to ask. Let others know what you are, and make an impression of themselves. And then Ravana decides to question him, do all of that, and then decides to insult him by putting fire onto his tail. And Hanuman says, "Great, I have my tail. Tail can go longer," and he just burns the whole Langa. The idea that anyway Rama will have to come and burn, but anyway I'll have to do a little part of it before the prelude that I will do it, and goes back to Rama, and when Rama congratulates him and you've done a wonderful job, he says, "No, I did not do anything. It's all because of you." So the humility and the willingness to surrender everything to the feet of Lord. So that's in a nutshell. Of course, I left the Vibhishana part. We can come back to that later.
Yeah, so I think it's really important and valuable to have that overview. And the other thing is that, at least for the purposes of this visit, Swamiji focused on the Tulsidas Ramayana, which has obviously a slightly different flavor than the other versions. But for me, the most beautiful and meaningful thing of Swamiji's visit is how he has this unique power to um, weave storytelling, but also deeper spiritual concepts uh, into it in the form of a story. So it's easy to stay engaged, and it's also easy to go as deep as you want to go. So maybe with that, I will transition, and maybe we'll go, Shillika, Narayanji, myself, and Gopi ji, on just what were your kind of like one major takeaway from the weekend, and then we can kind of dive into it in a little bit more depth a little bit later on. But just a kind of a teaser as to what was a big takeaway, what was something that really made an impression on you.
Um, I've grown up listening to the Valmiki Ramayana a lot more, being from the South. Um, so this was certainly, like you said, it was just such a poetic rendition. And this version of the Ramayana is immersed in Bhakti. So episodes of Hanuman meeting Vibhishana in Lanka prior to meeting Mother Sita is not a version that we have heard. So that was a very beautiful, kind of story and episode that I particularly enjoyed, of the lit lamp and these two devotees coming together and having that conversation about, not boasting about who they are, but really like just having that genuine moment where they are recognizing that they are very ordinary, below ordinary people who happen to have that grace of Bhagwan. So that for me was a big
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think we find that sometimes when we meet someone that has a shared interest about something, we do sometimes lose ourselves in the topic and you just get so caught in the topic. But I don't think that's how usually conversations go, right? Usually when someone's talking, in your mind, you're already thinking about what am I going to respond to? And then they're thinking, how can they respond? And then sometimes if it's a really toxic conversation, it becomes like, how can I one up that other person's experience? But sometimes I think you find something that's so soulful as a topic that you forget who you are and you just remember the topic. And I think that's how Swamiji explained it also. Narayananji?
Um, several things. I think to me, again, having grown up on Adhyatma Ramayana, where more of the emphasis is on the Adhyatma part of it, right? The stories are sidelines to or structures on which this can be all woven around. This was very interesting because when you give bhakti that importance and centrality, suddenly a lot of other things that you think are important just goes to the sidelines. You suddenly will or I at least found that, and for maybe people who practice it at such a deep devotional level may feel it, but I've never felt it in a way that Swamiji was explaining it, where everything revolves around that central idea of I am nobody, right? He was making this point over and over about, I am nobody, I know nothing, I do nothing, it's all your grace that goes. And there is nothing more striking than that level of humility, not just word, you know just making it like a speech and trying to express it, but if you really feel it in your heart. And we feel that love, surrender and love and devotion, we feel it to our kids, we feel it to our very very close people. To be frank, when my father was very close to dying, when I was in the hospital with him, we have spent so much of time. We were like friends generally, but he was just here lying down the hospital, was totally unconscious. I was not sad, actually. I felt something like, what, we have had so much of time together. I felt this total surrender kind of thing, right? What do I give you? What do I do to you? Kind of feeling, where of course, he was not able to register any of that, but you feel that I don't know how to explain that level of surrender, and there is nothing that you think is more valuable than that at that point, right? All that you think are important just fades in comparison. Only this extreme love and surrender to that person or that ideal or that goal shines. I think that to me was the takeaway.
Yeah, and I want us to come back to that topic of surrender because similar to what you were saying, that was the weekend showed me a different level of surrendering, and I think we'll come back to that. For me, one of the things that I really took away was this um, this idea that everything is linked, and that when we look at a story, it is not just a story, but it's an allegory for ourselves as well. And one thing that Swamiji wrapped up with on Sunday evening really has kept me thinking a lot, which is the idea that Lanka was an island separated from the mainland. And similarly, when we are in our ego, we are also separated from the mainland, which is Brahman, right? Which is the eternal consciousness. Our ego makes us feel like we're on an island. We're separated from the mainland. And then he talked about how when you're on that island, occasionally gurus do come and try to get through to you, right? Like Hanuman was a guru that came and he was able to get through to Vibhishna. But Vibhishna had to be allowed to be gotten to. So we are all a Vibhishna. When a Swamiji comes or a Guruji comes or a life event happens, are we able to receive the guru that's come from the mainland to take us back to the mainland? And this idea that we are all essentially a Vibhishana. Only Vibhishana is surrounded by Rakshasas, but you could say that in some ways we are all surrounded by the material world. So do we allow ourselves to go with the flow of the material world, to go with Ravana at the court, to not speak up? Or do we have the courage and do we have that conviction to say there's a different way, that I have a goal that's different than what the material world is telling me is my goal? And then finally, when we return to the motherland, or when we return to the mainland, which is connect to the Brahman, are we able to go with a sense of humility rather than a sense of pride? So to me, I've been thinking so much about that topic, and I don't think I've even processed it all the way. But to me, that was just a huge takeaway that hopefully, if we have time today, we can dive into. Gopiji?
Hey, so I'm just going to take this to a different twist. Um, I've been listening to Hanuman stories and Ramayana stories since growing up, right? For me, most of the time hearing those stories, it was just another story or a TV series that we watched Sunday, 9 a.m. in the morning, forgetting everything else. So I think what Swamiji did for me was he said, this whole story, the Sunderkand story, is not an outward thing. Like it's sometimes I feel it's playing within us. Like there is a Hanuman within us, there is a Vibhishana within us, there is a Ravana within us. So depending on what situation you are, your Hanuman personality sometimes comes out, or your Ravan personality comes out. At least for me, I'm going to say. So, which of those personalities does you exhibit more? Is for me was very interesting because we all have an ego. Sometimes we surrender to something that we truly believe in. Sometimes we do our best and say, I don't care what happens with the results, like what Hanumanji did. It's like, I'm going to Lanka. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm going to try my best. So for me, that was my takeaway. It's like all these characters are sitting within us. How do we, channelize it in our day-to-day life?
That's beautifully said. Um, I want to come back to what Naranji really described was this idea of surrender and um, and what exactly is surrender, because even at a satsang we had later, I remember Naranji asked that question about surrender as well, and really Swamiji had a different magnitude of what surrender means. So maybe I'll ask the person, at least on this um podcast, that I think has the most natural surrendering attitude, which is Shillika. Shillika, what when you hear the word like surrender, give up yourself, what does that mean to you, and what are times in your life that you have experienced it, or what are situations that allow you to enter that point of surrender? What does it feel like?
When I think of surrender, for me, it's Sairam. And I, it's everyday moments. It's small moments that I break into song and bhajan, and it's knowing, it's truly believing that he's got my back, and saying that no matter what happens, you're my person, and you better take care of me. I mean, there's a sense of authority also. There's a sense of I can tell him, not only look up to him and say, you are the all knowing and you're the all giving. And so please take care of me. But almost like, you are you're my best friend. You are my child. You're my husband. You're my partner. You're my lover. You're everything. So you better be here because I can't do this without you. Um, yeah, I don't know if that answered your question.
Gopi, anything to add there? Like, have you experienced surrender, or how have
Yeah,
you
I would
conceived of
say on the
surrender?
similar line. Yeah, I would similar lines to what Shlekaji said. I mean, for me, it's just total faith. I trust faith. For me, that's what surrender means. I'll do this, and I know that I have faith and trust in you that I'm doing your duty. I'm doing it. So for me, if I do my best, everything else is fine. So for me, that's surrender.
I have to be really honest and say that surrender for me is, I don't think I've done it. I don't think I do it well. And I think it's really difficult for me. And part of it is, I think, in one of Aparajitananda's other lectures I listened to online, he talked about how each person has a different relationship with God, right? And part of your job is to strengthen that relationship. So, not necessarily to have the same relationship that somebody else might. And he gave this beautiful example of how Tulsi Das has a complete surrender relationship to God, but Surdas has a father-child relationship to God where he feels like he needs to take care of Krishna. And he talks about how Mirabai has almost a kind of spousal relationship with God. And so each person can have a different relationship. And I have always felt like I have a little bit more of an impersonal relationship with God, where I don't find myself naturally speaking to God like my friend, but I have almost this conceptual understanding of God as like a life force. And furthermore, I think almost like the name of this whole podcast series, like Advaita After Hours, I think in my mind, I've always been conflicted between this idea of Advaita and then this overtly focus on Bhakti. And so to me, surrender has historically been hard because I have felt as though I don't need to surrender to somebody else. I need to surrender to myself, right? I need to recognize the greatness within. I need to be my own bastion. And this weekend really did clarify that a little bit. And I'm going to turn it over to Narayanji to explain that because I think he also had a similar registering moment. But I want to just be honest in saying that surrender has been really difficult for me. But the one way in which I was introduced to surrender, listening to Swamiji, is something I want to practice moving forward, which is this idea of complete and total humility. To start at that basic point that I, meaning me, Rajesh Ramanathan, am nothing, right? That whatever I do, that is not me, but something is acting through me. Just like Hanuman. I mean, this guy's amazing, right? I mean, he literally jumps across an ocean, fights bad guys, takes on a gigantic army, and he comes back and says, I'm nothing. I'm just like a lowly monkey. Vibhishana, right? A brother of Ravana, a tremendous warrior in his own might, incredibly well versed. He calls himself ignorant. He calls himself tamasic. He calls himself unworthy of godliness. So it almost illustrated to me that maybe for me, that needs to be what I need to meditate on is utter humility. And maybe in that I'll find surrender. Um, but maybe, I'd love to hear, Narayanji, how you felt about this particular topic and maybe this seeming paradox between Advaitism and total bhakti.
So after I told, and we talked after his talk, I said there seems to be some contradiction, right? But by evening, my contradictions were all clear. I came home, I had some time to think, and I went back in the evening and I told a couple of people that no, Swamiji was right. There was absolutely nothing conflicting. The conflict is in my ignorance. Um, we all think of, and like you said, we process things very differently. All of us process things differently, and if you process things with the head rather than the heart, sometimes, right, you get into a lot of knots for yourself to untangle. And somebody like me, I actually enjoy untangling the knots I put to myself. I love that, right? I create all these new theories in myself, and I try to unlock, and I find that they're nothing new, and I only have confused myself. But that's an intellectual learning for me as well. But to your point of humility and surrender, it is, if you look through, and I also had, and I probably still have, traces of this still left, of this Advaita versus Bhakti conflict. But even if you look at Bhagavad Gita, which is an Advaitic text, the way that we see it, Bhakti precedes Jnanam in the way it is structured, right? So one of the prerequisites for Jnanam is Bhakti. So what Swamiji said is, looking at us and knowing where we are, you know what, you guys will get Jnanam, but get your Bhakti right now. There is time for you to get your Jnanam. That will happen to you in whatever form, way, or fashion. Get your Bhakti, because the doorstep to Jnanam, one way is through bhakti. Of course, people say that karma, bhakti, jnanam, all of those. But karma and bhakti are those purifying elements for us to get that entire Advaitic realization. But what humility does, and in a, so I this story of a Swami asking a disciple to get water from the river, right? He said, get me water from the river. So he got water in a glass. And he said, no, I asked you to get water, not water in a glass. So you need a container for the jnanam. And a very related story says, the guru kept on giving a glass with a hole and asked him to fill water so many times, right? So the idea was to clean it, bring it, take the water, fill it, and by the time it just drips through, the glass gets clean. So get your vessel clean before you get filled with jnana. Humility is that cleansing thing. And there is nothing as powerful. Lots of times when I am humiliated, where either in a conference, when somebody asks a question which completely is against what you've been presenting, and there's 100 people, and you feel like, oh my God, really? Do I have an answer for it? You're trying to stand up and fabricate an answer right there. You kind of internally feel humiliated. But I think those are all refreshing, bettering processes for us. So there's nothing wrong in chasing that oneness Advaitic intellectual processing path. But I think humility, what Swamiji showed along the way, makes this process more worthwhile and probably faster.
Before we pivot
So,
into,
Rajesh, can I just ask you a
yeah,
question to what you earlier said, right? So, I mean, when I look at word surrender, right? At least for me, to your point, it's not that everything that I do, at least I'm not there yet. I'm surrendering, you know. Um, I'm going with that notion. But don't you do that in bits and pieces of your life? Like, say, when you're doing an operation, I mean, aren't you doing it based on your best ability with your best knowledge and, doing your best? Aren't you
I think
and
it's totally
then
true that there's this like very well-known concept of flow, right? Like when you're in flow, you lose yourself in the process. But to me, I think the difference between karma and karma yoga, right, is the idea of when you lose yourself in the process, who are you attributing the process to? In that, yes, when I am deeply engrossed in something like a complex operation, at some point, uh, I lose myself and things just proceed. But during that time, I don't think that I consciously acknowledge that things are proceeding because God is allowing it to happen. But rather, I'm kind of this passenger. And that's the opportunity, right? I think that's the opportunity that exists for me to make that leap and understand that in the process of flow, providing correct attribution of that flow, meaning that in that process of flow, you have all of the stars aligned. You have the perfect environment to try and understand and realize that God is working through you and attribute the work to the correct author. Now, whether you take it or not is the difference. And I think that might be, in my mind, surrender, right? Meaning that if you're always in a state of flow, but you don't consciously understand that God is there, then it doesn't come to the other conscious parts of your life. And I guess that would be the kind of bridge that I feel like needs to be crossed. That's what I think takes it from being a karma into being a true karma yoga as a path to a destination rather than just enjoying the path.
But I think this is probably a little bit of semantics as well, right? Your karma, your best effort that you are putting in, knowing that the fruits of the action is not something that I'm thinking of now. Right now, my goal is to do my job the best possible way, has already become karma yoga, right? You don't really have to say that, oh, because constantly thinking about God is a great thing, but I don't think we are at that convenience to actually constantly think about God every moment of our action, time of our action, right? So I think that underlying feeling before you start, and that's why all the prayer systems that before you start something at the end of the day, I think it's all meant to have that starting and the closure, and hoping that at some point of time the thread will continue. But I think what you're doing is karma yoga, even though you may not say that's karma yoga.
I want to just take a minute and pull up the Gita Panchamrit. You know, in our junior Yuva Kendra, one thing that we have been talking about is the Gita Panchamrit. And I am so thankful to Chinmaya Mission on so many levels. But one of the levels that I'm super thankful for is the opportunity that I have with Yuva Kendra, because I think with the children, I have learned more. And, you know, the Gita Panchamrit, correct me if I'm wrong, Narayanji, but it's a curated selection by Chinmaya Mission, right? It's random verses out of order taken from the Bhagavad Gita. And when I first heard the Gita Panchamrit and we chanted them in assembly, I kind of thought they just kind of took the greatest hits, right? But as we have analyzed it in Junior Yuva Kendra, one thing that's become quite evident, and this is exposed by the children, so I don't take any credit for this, is the fact that each Gita Panchamrit builds on top of the other. And I think it's all linked, right? Meaning that, you know, the very first one, can you just say the first one, Naranji, and then just tell the first one, yeah. So that one really just talks about how you as an individual get to choose if you're going to be your enemy or be your friend, meaning that you're responsible for yourself, right? And then the second one is the Karmanyevak. Do you want to say that really quick?
Karmanyevadhikaraste ma bhaleshu katachana ma karma phala hedurbhu ma de sangostva akarma.
And I think that's what you just finished talking about, how, yes, you have your actions, and in this state of flow, ideally, you're not thinking about the outcome, you're just thinking about the action itself, right? And I think that's what we're describing as a state of flow. And then the third one is the Yat Karoshi.
Yeah. Yat karoshi yadashnasi yajjuhoshi dadadi yada yat tapasyasi kaundeya tat kurushva madarpana.
And then the fourth one is Ananyas Chintayan Tomam, right? And I think that is the bridge of surrender that I want to get to, Gopiji, which is that the first two is the point of flow, right? I'm in charge of my life. I'm going to do the actions without thinking of the outcome and be lost in the action. That's flow. But then we have to think about verse 3 and 4, which is then to take that flow and give correct attribution, give the attribution to Krishna.
Yes.
And then to say for everything, have faith now that if we do that, Krishna will provide for us. And to me, that's that critical bridge that I think we need to cross to go from flow, verse 1 and 2, into, I think, correct attribution and surrender, which is 3, 4, 5. I hope that makes sense.
Correct. And there is in chapter 2, of course, chapter 2 is everything. There is this beautiful sloga that says, Prasade sarva dukkhanam hanirasyobajayade prasanna chedasahyasu buddhi paryavadishtade. That's about prasada buddhi, right? Taking everything as prasada. So this is all about attributing it to God, but attributing is all my karmas, but the fruits of action, what do? Everything is prasada, right? So you connect both of those. Whatever I get is prasadam. Good, bad, ugly is prasadam. Whatever I do is for him. And that's the last verse, right? In Gita Panjamra, the last verse is, you know what? It's all mine. Sarva dharman parityajya mami sharanagadi. Right? And that was what Swamiji was saying. Hanuman was sharanagadi, Vibhishan was sharanagadi. There was nothing. I'm surrendering everything to you. Mamegam Sharanam Braja. Ahantva Sarva Pabebhya. He did not say, it's very powerful. I'll take care of all your sins. I mean, that's a way to motivate people, right? Don't worry, I'll pardon you of all of it, like the presidential pardon power. I'll pardon you of all of your sins. Even though I have problems, if you really think about it, the karma theory doesn't let that happen if you look at, right? And I have to go through my own karmas. Will God pardon? And that's a different topic for a different time.
Yes, I think that would be for me the full circle in terms of having a critical appraisal of where I am now. Where do I personally need to go? Which is, I think having an intellectual understanding of faith is one thing, but then in the heat of the good moment, being able to attribute correctly so that when you're not in a good moment, the attribution comes naturally.
Comes naturally, correct. Yeah, and that's practice, right? That is the, like sports people have the muscle memory. This is that mental correction that we have to have.
What are your thoughts, Gopi?
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like you're a Ravana, right? Where you go about saying that, oh, this was me, this was my ego, I was the one who did this operation successfully. I mean, you don't do that. I mean, knowing you, I think you have some kind of humility, or you are humble enough to recognize that there is a higher power that is guiding me through all this. Whether it's by saying your morning prayer or evening prayer, I think for me, those are all signs of that. Yeah, there is some signs of realization or surrendering happening to that higher power. At least that's my interpretation.
Shilika, what are your thoughts on this overly intellectual discussion about surrender?
And, you wake up in the morning and it's, I've spoken to Narayananji about this before, but, when you apply that vibhuti, that's a moment if you can actually truly apply it and think for yourself, what is it means when you're applying it on your forehead. That's a moment of surrender. Because at that point, you are telling yourself and reminding yourself that that ash is what is going to remain of you at the end of the day or at the end of your time. And that ash is no different from the ash that, the person next to you, the person you're waking up with, or the person you're nourishing every day as your child is going to wake up with. And so, to recognize at that point, at that moment, if you can tell yourself with those simple things, those are acts of surrender. If you can wake up in the morning and through the good times and bad times of parenting, if you can say, Lord, this is your child, that is an act of surrender. I don't intellectualize it so much, but those are the everyday moments. Those are little things. I don't think some of it you do consciously, some of us have to do more consciously. But it's, you wake up in the morning and when you say your Karagre Vasate Lakshmi, you are invoking these three goddesses in the palm of your hand. You can interpret that in two ways. You can say you're invoking them to come to you and to help you, with knowledge, wealth, and strength. You can say that the power of your wealth, your knowledge, and strength lies in your own hands. You can invoke them, or you can say that this is on me. When you give it to them to say, Amma, you are the one, come through me, come and stay with me in my hands and guide me through, there is surrender. Right? And simple things. I think, like when we say our prayers, I think if you say it with that right, if you say it with a depending on what attitude you're saying your prayers with, there is surrender in each one of them. I think one thing I noticed, say this time when we were serving Swamiji his food, one thing I noticed is he actually didn't speak at all while he was eating. You could, say that in some ways that there is also a moment of surrender right there. You are having that conversation with your meal and attributing it to, Bhagwan nourishing you through every grain, being thankful and just recognizing that this didn't just happen. There is so much that you can be thankful for. And the moment, I think, when you have thankfulness, when you have gratitude, there is surrender there too. Because you recognize that this alone couldn't have done that. And yeah, so I think, listening to some of these stories of bhaktas, listening to Shivananda Lahiri just, a couple months before, and listening to Shankaracharya, uh, just poetically expressing how he knows nothing. Those are all moments. And I think it's moments like that when you continue to have several moments where you recognize and you are able to see that, there is so much that you don't know. There is surrender happening in each one of those moments to say, thank you for, showing me and taking me on this path of.
The other thing about the surrender that really resonated with me about the story was the idea that there's no prerequisites for surrender, right? In that, there's this beautiful conversation between Vibhishana and Hanuman, where Vibhishana's sort of talking about how he's not worthy of God, right? In that he's saying, I come from this asura background. I'm fully tamasic. I'm surrounded by bad thoughts and bad people. And Hanuman goes, I'm a monkey, right? I'm a monkey that's bad luck. And if God accepts me completely, he's going to accept you too. And sometimes I feel, and I think, I've spoken to Shillika about this before, that sometimes I feel like there needs to be prerequisites to pray, even, right? That you need to be in the correct frame of mind. You need to clean yourself. You need to, you know, light the lamp. You need to do all of these things so that you're ready for God to come into your life. You're ready to, welcome Lakshmi into your house. But I think the one thing that episode really resonated with me was this idea that the only prerequisite is for you to want it, and then God is there for you.
Swamiji also said something very beautiful this time. He said, it's not about you being capable. He said, if you are available, like things will happen. So that in being available too, there is that surrender to say, I don't know anything. I don't know if I'm good enough, but I'm here to say that there is that strength that will come, which will take you through. Yeah, it was beautiful. And I think very often we see that.
Just on a concluding note, Naranji, can you comment? It's along the lines of this availability that Shilika talked about. Remember that article that you circulated around by Shantananda ji about like the things that we can do in our daily lives to give like 5 minutes to God? Can you just maybe let's conclude on that note, if you can just sort of talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So I don't remember the exact specifics, but the contours of what Swamiji was saying, right? And same, in line with what Shilikaji said about the availability thing. I think a part of what again, personally what we miss is, while we do a lot of things, and Rajesh, you mentioned this a little earlier with respect to attribution, a lot of what we miss is, in the rush to do things, and we have so many things to do, and we may do it well, that how do you keep that ego aside? And that's fundamental to everything. And you go to, especially with praying, right? And that is one place, and this has been my feeling for quite some time, that prayer has been designed for nothing. So you can say that you prayed for this God, this reward, and you might be rewarded. I think I'm kind of, I don't know if it's convinced is the right word, but I believe now that prayer has been designed, the altar and the way, whatever be the mode of prayer that you do, the prayer has been designed for ego sublimation alone. I don't think there's any other reason to pray, any other need to pray. Because if prayer is what gives you all that you want, then you're getting into very dangerous waters. So it is, at the end of the day, ego sublimation alone. And Swamiji's Shantanandaji's article about how we have to find time for God, because God is always available. He's trying and is waiting to see if this guy is ever going to come and talk to me, is ever going to say something to me. I mean, at least in a very broad idea. So God is always there waiting, and as much work he has with all the people, apparently he has time for each one. So the idea so this is another. So Brahmaji's one day is what, 1,000 kalpas, which is 1,000 times 4 chaduryugas, whatever that 4,32,000 years is. So his one day is that much. He has pretty much a lot of time for all of us. So they are not short of time, and with all these people around, they have time. The question is, are you willing to do those things that will attract their attention? And what gods want is, they're so bored of. So this is why, I keep telling this all the time. So you go to the temple and tell Krishna, give my kid good grades, make my kid smart, make my kid rich. Krishna is sitting and saying, have you read my story? I have had all these kids and none of them turned out to be good. They all fought against each other, and they destroyed the whole whole Yadava clan. So I can't really make your kid good. Tell me what you can to do that, and I'll help you in the process. So don't ask me for. So the point is not to go and ask for things, but just let God, whoever is Ishtadevata, know that I'm here. I'm here, waiting for you. Are you there? So I heard this very nice conversation by a Bhagavatam Acharya. He says the way to have conversation with Krishna and to have Krishna talk back to you is to have conversations like you converse to a friend. So when you go to the temple, when you go, ask him, did you have food? Is the priest actually putting the right clothes on you? Where is your mala that I saw yesterday? I don't see that today. Did you keep it somewhere else? Is yesterday's food better or today's better? Do you like that food or not? You know what? I was trying to get some bananas for you, but then I thought you might have something better that you want. I thought I'll check with you what you like, and next time I'll get you that. Have those conversations with Krishna, and here, with time, in your mind, Krishna answering all those questions, rather than getting your laundry list to him. And that's so, it's about availability. And Shantanandaji's ways was how we spend time, and there was quite a bit of in that article about discipline, right? How do we get, and then Swamiji also spend a lot of time on this. Rajaji also spent a lot of time on discipline. So I think there is lots that we can learn, we can benefit from all of this and go forward.
And I think Shantananda ji, in that article, the one thing I really appreciated it is sometimes this can all feel so overwhelming to kind of say, oh my gosh, I have to make myself available to God. I have to give everything to God. This is like, where do I start? And the one thing I appreciate about his article is that he broke it down. He said, just start doing 5 things, right? Wake up and say Karagre Vaste Lakshmi. So you kind of start your day, as Shilika ji mentioned, about attributing things. Then when you have a shower, say Gange Chemine Devi, so you're starting to like value the water that's showering you. And then before you eat, to say Brahmarpanama Annapurne, so you are thankful for the meals that you're given. And then Ramaskandam before bed, to kind of again put your faith in God for giving you a restful sleep. And he said, you just start off with those small things, start to give God just those pre-scheduled breaks, and then slowly let God into more and more of your life. And I thought that was a really nice outline for those of us that kind of struggle to make ourselves constantly tuned to Bhagwan's frequency. With that, we'll start to conclude. Does anyone have anything that they want to close with, Shillika or Gopiji?
This is not about the Sunderkand, but just the story that Swamiji had shared with the entire assembly. The story of Dr. Stephen,
Doctor.
who, you know, visits this old lady in the hut. I think to recognize on an everyday
Shilka, just say the
moment.
story briefly. Just say the story briefly so people know what you're referring to.
So there's a doctor, we're going to call him Dr. Stephen, and who's just found a cure to a very rare type of cancer. And he is going to be felicitated with an award, and he's a guest speaker at an event. And he's on his way to the event when his airplane faces some issues and there's an emergency landing. And he's really trying to get to this place. So he goes and he's inquiring about when the next airplane is going to take off. When he is told that it's not for another 10 hours, but if he was to take a car, he would reach his destination in less than 4 hours. So he gets in the car and he's driving, and suddenly he notices that he's lost. He has no cell phone reception. He has nowhere to stop and ask, because he seems that he's out of civilization. And suddenly he sees that he's heading towards a forest, and he doesn't know where to turn. And wherever he turns, he seems to be getting further lost, until he finally comes and he sees this one small hut. And he goes inside, and there's this very old elderly lady who greets him, welcomes him inside, and says that she'll be back after her evening prayers. And in that small hut, she's seen praying, and at the same time, while she's doing some chores, she's taking care of an infant in a cradle who's very sick. And Dr. Stephen asks her, what's wrong with the child and what she was praying to God for. And, she says that she's very thankful because God has answered every single one of her prayers, save one. Um, and, but she's confident that that one prayer too shall be answered. And it's just a matter of time. And the curious doctor looks at her and says, "Can I ask you, what is that one prayer that has not been answered?" And she says, "Well, my grandson, the child in this cradle, is suffering from this very rare type of cancer, which seems to have been cured only by this one doctor named Stephen. And I have been praying to God to send that doctor to me." And, with tears in his eyes, he reveals that he is Dr. Stephen, and he understands why, certain events unfolded the way they did in his life and made him be there at that moment in time. And that his presence there was, much greater than that of being in the award function or whatever. But, I think it's through stories like this. If you can wake up in the morning and you can tell yourself and remind yourself that we are here today. We might not fully understand why. We may not fully understand what our purpose is. Um, but it's okay. It's okay not to know. It's okay not to have all the answers. And it's okay to be available as his instrument to, and through you, he will, do the needful. So, but just to remind yourself that you never know. I mean, and similarly, if we can welcome everybody who comes into our lives the same way and say, maybe they have come in and, we don't know how they're going to impact. But if we have that welcoming attitude, um, that's again a form of surrender, really, because you are welcoming Bhagwan.
Beautifully said. Gopi ji?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me here, Rajesh. Glad to be part of this group as a guest speaker. I'll just say it is so glad that Swamiji visited us for those 2 days, 2.5 days. I think it is a great experience, a lot of learning. And if the one message that Swamiji said, I think he said this during the assembly time, was do the right thing. And I think if I can take that away, I think it'll be good. So yeah, so thank you for having me.
Sunday will say the last word.
Bye-bye.
Yay.
All right. Hariom. On that note, we'll meet again next week. Thank you.
Adios.